Okay, well, thank you, Greg. Really appreciate that introduction. I'm Jill Zuckman. I'm really thrilled to be joined by three remarkable women, Betsy Reed, Jennifer Cunningham, and Rebecca Grossman-Cohen. And we've got a lot to talk about today, but we also want to have a conversation with you, so we're going to have plenty of time for questions. So much has been happening recently, over the last year, when it comes to journalism, when it comes to how news organizations are presenting themselves to the world, how they're interacting with the government. But first, I want to try to take a step back, because a lot has happened over the last couple of decades with the advent of the internet, with Craigslist demolishing classified ads. News organizations have had to figure out new ways to make money and to reinvent themselves. So I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about how each of your news organizations are doing things differently, not only to survive, but to thrive. So why don't we start with you, Betsy?
Thank you, and hi, everyone. Yeah, it's the question of the moment. For us at The Guardian, The Guardian is a 200-year-old originally British newspaper, but began to adapt to the digital age a couple of decades ago, and about 10 years ago was growing rapidly in an audience and reputation around the world as a leading digital news outlet, but was losing a lot of money. So at that point, Kath Viner, the editor-in-chief, came in and developed a digital reader revenue model, which was actually distinctive and remains pretty distinctive today because we have no paywall. It relies on voluntary contributions from readers. And at this point in the US, 70% of our revenue comes from those voluntary contributions. It's going to be about 58 million this year. Globally, it's more like 140 million, and it makes up the bulk of our revenue now. And the key to this model for us is the absence of a paywall. So we reach the widest possible audience with our quality news, and then people are moved to give because, in the current state of the world, people do value themselves having access to quality news, but also the fact that anyone can actually read it, which is not true of other news organizations.
That's amazing. That is a significant amount of revenue, asking people to do it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
So first off, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all today and looking forward to today's discussion. To your question, Jill, I think it is maybe naive at best and foolish at worst to rely on a single stream of revenue in this media ecosystem that we're navigating. At Newsweek, we have a very aggressive approach to diversifying our revenue. We have a thriving events business, we have a subscriptions business, we have a rankings business and a healthcare business as part of our B2B vertical, and it's really important to be diverse in your approaches to revenue in this market. We also really see a lot of value in positioning our brand as a very independent, centrist type of media organization, that we're very fact-based and really want the reader and the audience to decide. And then there's the last piece, which is participatory journalism. We really believe in engaging with our audience wherever they live, whether it's on social, whether it's through desktop or on YouTube, and all of these approaches is really what is helping us to build a sustainable newsroom.
Great. Rebecca?
Hi, well, thank you for having me. Great to be here. When we think about kind of the last, sort of decade of change that the Times has gone through, we've been through, I would say, a transformation over the last 15 years or so. We think about kind of three broad things that we've done. So At a high level, first, we think about what are the most important things that the Times does or needs to do to continue being who we are, appealing to people, being really valuable in the world, and kind of be willing to change everything else around that. We talk about it as our immutables. What are the things that we cannot change? And kind of be open to changing everything else to support that. So the values that we have there, are independent quality journalism. That's the rigor that goes into it, the creativity, all that goes into making who we are as an independent news organization. Hold on to those and kind of be open to changing everything else to support, the longevity of the business. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we've been really clear-eyed about our strategy. It's taken a lot of work to get there, but our digital strategy, which started to kind of evolve and come into shape in the last decade, and that's being a destination sort of digital business, subscription-driven business. There are three components to that. It's, be the world's best news destination, build a suite of really engaging lifestyle products around it, and then put that in a bundle together to create a product that people want to engage with every single day. So be really clear-eyed about that, communicate that to the company in a way that they understand into the world. And then the third thing is approach it all with a real sense of ambition. We have talked about wanting to be the essential subscription for curious people everywhere around the world. And that, again, is really clarifying for the company and points us all in a direction. And that's, we've been pretty effective in doing that in the last 10 years. It's taken a lot of work. What we see today is that we're closing in on 13 million subscribers, which is incredible, and of course the biggest number of subscribers we've ever had in our history. 150 million people who are registered with the Times and growing. We have 50 to 100 million people who visit the Times every single week. So we feel a lot of optimism around it. Of course, we're in a very complicated moment, which I know we're going to get into, with AI coming into the forefront, with attacks on press freedom and journalism. But ultimately, we look back. This is our 175th year in business. The Times is celebrating 175 years. And so we feel like if we're here today, we're going to be able to keep evolving as long as we're really focused on what's most important about our work.
Well, let me just follow up on that with you, Rebecca, because the Times has been kind of leading the way with things like Wirecutter, the cooking app, the Daily. I mean, there just seem to be a number of things that have really popped for different kinds of people or different things. Wordle. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, and how does that engage marketers? Like, how do marketers view where they want to put their content?
Yeah, those products are meant to help people engage with their passions and the things that they really care about outside of the news. And so whether you're, as you just described, if you're a cook, like a home cook or a person who loves to host people, or if you want to go check out, what the Knicks are doing, how they're performing, or whatever your home team is, or you need shopping advice, or if you want to not entirely turn your brain off, but kind of get away from the news and play a game, Wordle or Connections or whatever. We've created a way for people to do that, and that means that they're coming every single day to the Times for any number of reasons, which is great for our subscription business. Builds deep engagement and habits. It's also great for advertisers who are looking to reach people in products and in places that that people love and that they want to spend every day or multiple times a day in. And so it's also given us a lot of space to be really experimental in different and particularly working with advertisers. And you can see that in a few examples. We've launched a bunch of new formats, new ways of, engaging through video, multimedia, and there are a few examples that I can point to over the last year or so for advertisers to kind of think about. You can look at our new game that we launched called Crossplay. Has anybody played that? It's the version of Scrabble. It's our first multiplayer game, and it's a new app. If you have not downloaded it, I suggest you do it. You can play with friends, you can play with the computer, but for the first time, we've actually introduced an ad in that experience, where we really haven't done that in games because we wanted to keep it very clean and engaging, which ultimately has been very good for the business. And when we have introduced ads, we've seen real success there. So new ad in crossplay. Of course, we have our new watch tab, and that's our vertical video feed where you can go and kind of watch the Times' very high quality videos in the way that you would on Instagram or TikTok and feel maybe slightly less brain dead after doing it. We've got ads in there as well that marketers are really enjoying experimenting with. We have something called Brand Match, which is something that we launched a couple years ago with the emergence of generative AI, where we're able to be much more targeted and sophisticated in how we reach people. That's doing really well for marketers. And it's those, and actually one more worth pointing out, we've never done product placements in our products, and sort of for probably obvious reasons, but with cooking, we felt a little more interested in experimenting there. And so we launched a product placement with McCormick in December for Cookie Week in our videos there. And so these are all new things that we weren't able to do when we didn't have this suite of products, and we have in the last few years. And I'll just say that in 2025, our digital ad revenue grew by 20%. And so it's really working. People are loving it. Consumers are loving it. Marketers are loving it.
That's fascinating. And Betsy, I think that The Guardian is doing some different things too in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in the last couple of years, we've been developing much more robust sports content, more wellness. But we're really excited about a few things that are about to come out. We're launching our first ever video podcast in May. It's going to be called Stateside. It has great hosts, so we're really excited about that. And it will be newsy, but an interview podcast with a kind of, very Guardian vibe, which is a little bit different from a lot of mainstream US news organizations. In the UK, The Guardian has a real, they call it playful intelligence. They have a lot of great culture coverage, great food coverage. And here, I think, in the past decade, we've been focused more on hard news. So what our goal is now is to bring some of that playful intelligence, that the whole suite of to reach people where they are, not only in their daily news diet, but what they're going to have for dinner, and their exercise routine. So and what they want to listen to, and how to. It's been very important to us to help people sort of digest the news, so it's not just this steady diet of sometimes unrelenting and scary news items, but opinion and analysis, and now with the video podcast, and we're also developing ambitious multimedia plans that will bring our journalists to other platforms, talking about the news, and helping people kind of make sense of it. So that's all kind of really being developed right now, and I think people will see it in the coming months.
Great. And Jennifer, what about Newsweek? Do marketers have lots of different options for what you're doing?
We're really seeing a lot of growth and marketer interest, particularly in our multimedia offerings. We've really scaled up in multimedia during my tenure here at Newsweek, and that's where we're really seeing the growth. We have a number of franchise shows. Our video podcast host, H. Alan Scott, is here in the audience. He hosts our entertainment video podcast. We also have something called Newsmakers that we've introduced in the last year that we really feel is much more reflective of the modern era of storytelling. We're speaking to CEOs, world leaders, tastemakers, A-list celebrities, and they get a cover story and they get a sit down with me that is very much akin to, very much like CBS News Sunday mornings, kind of a video sit down, and there's a QR code in the magazine, and we just want to, number one, meet readers and the audience where they are, give more options to marketers, and really have Newsweek's reporting be more reflective of the modern era of storytelling.
I'm just curious, how are you all thinking about reaching the Gen Z audience? Because they seem to be like on the mountaintop that everybody wants to get to, but nobody has necessarily cracked the code. Why don't I start with you, Betsy?
Sure. I mean, you know, we for a long time have been building an Instagram audience. We see a lot of Gen Z interaction there. You know, we're going to be branching out to different platforms soon. But I mean, I do think, you know, we're looking for ways to not only have them interact with us on those platforms, but develop a more direct relationship. So we're launching newsletters on a variety of topics that I think will appeal to that demographic. And I think the video podcast is going to be huge because it'll be on YouTube. We're looking to, like, you know, really develop a presence on those platforms where we find those audiences, and then, you know, develop content that will resonate with them. And I will say, you know, it isn't, this generation, it's a complicated one, it's diverse, and much of it is like, these young people are very engaged with the news. They care a lot about it, and we have some very devoted followers of the sort of most sort of socially conscious Gen Z demographic. So we're excited about kind of developing that relationship further.
Jennifer, how are you thinking about Gen Z?
So for our audience in general, and Gen Z specifically, we really believe in reaching those readers and that audience where they are. And increasingly, it is not coming in through the front door. It's not coming in through Newsweek.com. As Betsy indicated, we have a very robust presence on social media, on Instagram, on TikTok, and we really feel like that is almost the on-ramp for Gen Z. They engage with our content on social, and then they read a piece of long-form journalism. Then they engage with us and our journalists and our editors online. And then hopefully they become a subscriber. And so we really feel like social is the first step in building a relationship and engagement with Gen Z.
So Rebecca, does the Gen Z audience, do they just go in the front door to the New York Times? Do they come voluntarily, or are you having to go out and find them places?
Yeah, contrary to what you might think about the New York Times audience, we actually have a pretty substantial number of people who are of that generation who spend time with us. So I think something like 30% of our audience is made up of Gen Z worldwide already, which is encouraging. Of course, ultimately we need them to, you know, spend a lot of time with us, subscribe, but to have that number of them coming in feels really, like I said, encouraging. I'll also just say that we don't think about, when we're creating our journalism or we're thinking about the stories we want to tell, we're not thinking which demographic do we want to reach. It's really about the formats ultimately, and these two ladies were just explaining it really well. It's the formats that you reach them in that is compelling to them. So similarly, we have a significant presence on the social platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, that we think I will repeat what they said, bring many more viewers to our content and build relationships in some ways with them off of our platform so that we can ultimately bring them back to the Times. So we see a very similar kind of behaviors and patterns.
So I feel like I would be remiss if I did not raise the issue of AI. I mean, it is the hot topic these days. Everybody's trying to figure out either how to use AI in their business or what's appropriate if you're a journalist. I'm curious how your newsrooms and your business are thinking about how to deal with it, and also how do you deal with third parties who want to come and take all of your content and then offer it up through some other platform. So jump ball, who wants to dive in?
I'm happy to jump in. So at Newsweek, we've been really bullish about AI and really see it as almost a bicycle for the mind. We have a suite of AI tools that we use within the newsroom called Martin, and it's named after J. Thomas Martin, the founder of Newsweek. And it helps the reporters go faster. And the way that I explain it to the reporters is we want reporters out in the field. We want them on the phone. We want them in the car driving to talk to somebody. We don't want them necessarily loading their stories up in the CMS or trying to figure out which photo goes with this photo. We want them getting scoops. We want them in front of people. Nobody wants to talk to my AI agent or my digital twin. They want to talk to me. And so that is the way that we're using AI. And to your other question about how we are navigating large language models, using our content to learn, I feel like there's a compromise here. The LLMs need media to train up, but we also need to be compensated for that intellectual property. So I feel like media organizations can come to some sort of compromise with the tech organizations that are driving these LLMs, and there has to be a way for us to all walk away. We may not get everything that we want, but at least we can arrive at a place where, at the very least, the journalists are being appropriately compensated for the work and that they put into our stories and videos every day.
And has Newsweek struck deals with some of those entities?
We have, but it's a drop in the bucket. There are many LLMs, and it's something that is an ongoing conversation. But like I said, I'm optimistic, and I really believe there's a compromise there.
Betsy?
So, I mean, I think we're all wrestling with this. It's a huge challenge for journalism. I think there will be, I mean, we've seen, AI slop flood the internet. People are accessing information that they believe is real, that is not real, because even the best LLMs hallucinate. They invent things. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think that perhaps the silver lining for journalism is that it's going to be incredibly valuable and important to have trusted journalistic brands who have verified the information, that it is not entirely produced by AI, and that people can actually trust and rely on. And that is not to say that we won't make use of some of these tools. We have clear principles that govern our use of them. We won't ever publish anything that has never been, seen by a human. And all of our articles are written by human journalists and researched by human journalists. But in the course of that research, there may be ways to incorporate the tools of AI to make things faster. But I think it's going to be really important for each organization is going to come down in a different place, but we are going to have to draw some very clear lines, because I think that if we don't do that, there's a risk that that trust will. I mean, we've already seen trust in media erode, and I don't think any of us can afford to see it erode any further. Right. It's just very important that we do our best to get these issues right.
And Rebecca, does the Times have guidelines for how its journalists can use AI or not use AI?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole infrastructure in the newsroom that's built around innovating with AI, but ultimately we are a human-centric news organization and going to be very much that way for a long time. Similarly, though, we think there are a lot of opportunities to make the work more efficient, even more creative, and just unleash resources in a way that we couldn't have previously. So in the newsroom, we've done a lot to experiment with data gathering, for instance, or analyzing big reams of data to help put together stories that may have taken a year previously. They are now taking a month or a week even, just to really just get the analysis together, and that's been amazing. Everything we do is always similarly going to be touched by a human, and that will be the foundation of who we are. But we're not running away from the technology. Of course, we've taken a really firm stance on IP and the importance of compensating quality, news and information, and really creative organizations for all the work and resource that we've put into the content. We do not believe that these platforms ever had permission to use our stuff, and so we are, very firm on the point that they need to seek that out, come to negotiated agreements with us. We have lawsuits that are, making that point really clearly, and we have deals that are making that point really clearly, and we'll continue to pursue both strategies as we need to.
I'm sure it's a little bit like legal whack-a-mole to keep finding the new things that are popping up.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad behavior out there, and clearly there's we have not, settled. We believe the law is clear, but there is obviously lack of clarity that needs to come to some sort of settlement at some point. But ultimately, I think you were making the point, Jennifer, that if we don't create the right compensation models, I think the products are at risk, those tools are at risk. Obviously, society is at risk. I don't think it's dramatic to say that. There is so much going on to undermine our democratic institutions, and journalism is a key pillar of that. And so, we need to do whatever we can to make sure it's sustainable.
So switching gears a little bit, this recent period has been really challenging for news organizations. We've seen devastating layoffs at the Washington Post, a really rocky leadership transition at CBS. There is a likely ownership change for CNN, and unclear what that's going to mean. I'm curious what each of your news organizations are doing to stay resilient and strong within the newsroom, but also within the business. And I know we've talked about some of the diversification, but seeing all those things going on around you must be a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I think all of those developments that you mentioned really bring into sharp relief the why ownership matters in media, and how being able to be independent and not controlled by a billionaire owner that has other business interests at stake that can influence the way they make decisions about the journalism is absolutely crucial. And this is something that media critics have been saying for a long time, but it's just really it's palpable now that really matters. And I feel very lucky to be at The Guardian that has an unusual ownership structure where we're owned by a trust in the UK. It's called the Scott Trust. It's been around for 200 years. Its sole mission is to preserve our journalism in perpetuity. It's sort of akin to what we would think of as a nonprofit here in the US, although it technically isn't in the UK. But that allows us, we operate as a for-profit business here. We have advertising, we raise reader revenue, we do other things we've launched affiliate revenue, so we have a diversified approach in the US, but that independence of ownership, I think, is absolutely crucial. And while we have a unique structure, there are obviously a lot of other institutions that are also able to preserve their journalistic independence through that type of ownership. But I just think it's incredibly important in this moment.
Yeah. Jennifer?
So you just talked about resilience earlier, and I really feel like at Newsweek, resilience is built into our business strategy. I want a newsroom where the reporters and the editors aren't worried about our revenue and our bottom line, and if they're going to be laid off. Those are big challenges that that is in my hands, and I take that really seriously. And so in addition to the diversity of revenue streams that we had spoken about earlier, we really feel like there is a huge market for really leaning into centrist journalism, into independent journalism, really appealing to readers and audience who feel like they are maybe tired of the tribalism and the partisanship that can manifest in journalism, and really be a home for them and a platform where people from here in South Texas and in the South Bronx can come together and disagree civilly, but also be able to digest facts and then form their own opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, you have owners who have a long tradition and commitment to the news organization. That must be pretty fortunate for you.
Yeah, the Ochs-Sulzberger family has owned the Times for most of its history, not quite 175 years, but a lot of it. And Betsy, I agree with you similarly that it's thanks to them and their real commitment to supporting an independent news organization. We've been able to invest in the journalism even when it's hard. We're deeply sympathetic to all of our colleagues in the Washington Post and other news organizations that have had to go through really tough stuff, and we ourselves have been through hard moments in the past, and I'm sure we'll all have to reckon with that. But our strong belief, and the Ochs-Sulzberger family's strong belief, is that by investing in the journalism, you're actually investing in your product, and it ultimately is sort of a virtuous circle that makes the business successful, and we've seen that play out over our 175-year history. There's a really great story that is a kind of historical example of this. I think it was World War II when lots of papers were suffering and needing to cut back on their resources. A lot of papers shrunk in size by cutting down the number of articles that they were writing, and they could maintain the ad revenue. They needed to shrink the size of the paper, and to do that, they cut back on their journalism. The Times cut back on its advertising and made it really clean and just to continue to cover the war. And on the other side of it, we saw the benefit of that in our subscriber base relative to others. And that's just one example of the ways we've done that in our history. You continue to see that even in the 2000s when it was really rough, we continued to invest. And so that's just a core tenet of who we are and will continue to be. And we believe that as long as millions of people are seeking out quality information, there's going to be a business for that.
Great. So let's talk about democracy. News organizations, journalism has always been a pillar of democracy. Over the past year, we've seen President Trump and his administration undermine the traditional interactions between government officials, journalists, and news organizations. He has attacked women journalists repeatedly. He's called them piggy. He called one woman reporter ugly inside and out. He called another woman rotten, and yet another stupid and nasty. Over the weekend, he attacked the woman who is probably the dean of the White House press corps when it comes to covering President Trump. He called her a sleazebag in a lengthy post online. How do you deal with this as a news organization? How do you deal with this as how do your individual journalists deal with it? What are you doing? Why don't I start with you, Betsy?
Well, it's obviously, appalling and very challenging for individual journalists to have to endure that kind of abuse. So we try to provide support, as they need it, because the job is, inherently more stressful now. It's also, it creates a dilemma sometimes when we're doing an article and we're seeking comment from administration officials, and that comment comes back in vitriolic form that includes copious insults about the journalist in question or the news organization, and so that what do you do with that? We have we don't have like a hard and fast rule, but we do err on the side of including that in the article because we think it's important as a matter of transparency for people to see what it is that we're dealing with. And that we are trying to be on the up and up. We're going to them for comment. We're never going to publish an article that doesn't actually try to get the other side. And so, and I do actually believe it's very important. I think because things are so polarized, there could be a tendency to sort of think, well, we're not going to get anything, so why even talk to those people? But I think it's very important to do so. To be fair and to be consistent in our practices as journalists, and to be transparent about that with our readers, so they can see that we are listening to the other side. We're trying to find out what their rationale is, and then we're being clear about our conclusions. We're very. Our approach to covering Trump is to be very direct and candid. And sometimes we are a little bit more forthright than other mainstream news organizations because we're clear about our progressive values but I think it is important still to do the journalistic due diligence, which is what we do.
Jennifer, is Newsweek pushing back? How are you engaging when this happens?
So we cover the Trump administration just like we covered the Biden administration, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to be fawning to the administration, and we don't want to be reflexively adversarial. We're here to cover the facts, present them to the reader and to our audience, and ultimately that's who we're beholden to. We're not beholden to the sources and the protagonists of our stories. We're beholden to the readers and to the audience, and that's what we keep in mind, and that's what I tell the journalists. Like Betsy indicated, we do offer support for reporters who are on the receiving end of vitriol. And to be clear, it's not only the White House that has used abusive language towards journalists.
Right.
It is, and it's also outside of politics. And so I've had reporters get death threats on social media and really be abused by sources. And so it's important that we are protecting journalists and that we are supporting them in this work. But ultimately, our job as journalists is to report the facts, and we're going to do that regardless of how a politician behaves.
That's a good point. It is definitely happening in a lot of different places, things you would never have seen before. So, Rebecca, what is the Times strategy?
Yeah, I think our publishers, maybe great-grandfather coined the phrase that we will report without fear or favor, which many other news organizations has taken on, and we like that. And so that's our approach. We will report without fear or favor. We also are, putting a lot of infrastructure to support our journalists who are on the front lines, who are both in danger of being attacked online and also in physical danger. We've had people show up at journalists' homes or executive editors' homes. It's a really kind of scary moment for people. But our jobs are to continue to report kind of whatever comes. Obviously, we see this too as a real distraction tactic. It's his vitriol, and anyone who comes out with comments that are like this tends to be when they don't like our reporting. They may agree with it but not like to see it, and so you just have to kind of recognize what it is. The Times has put a lot of effort, we were talking about this earlier, into being openly, defensive of our journalists and kind of going out there in the comms, not letting our journalism only speak for itself. I think years ago we would have said, like, let's not get ourselves, let's not get our corporate company in the mix, let's let the journalism speak for itself. We don't feel like we can do that anymore, and we have to go out and defend Maggie and Katie and all the people who are being attacked left and right. And so, we're continuing to do that and will.
Yeah, that's been really noticeable, that the Times has been standing up and speaking out against some of these attacks.
Which I know our journalists appreciate and they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question for me before we turn to audience questions, just because it's so timely. On Saturday, President Trump put out a graphic taking credit for reshaping the media. And he cited, names of journalists who are no longer on the air or no longer at a news organization, and really took credit that he is having this impact. He and his FCC commissioner also accused news organizations of wanting to lose the war against Iran, and Trump even used the word treason in talking about the journalists covering the war. The FCC commissioner threatened broadcasters' licenses. Does this eventually have an impact, maybe not on your news organization, but on others and how they go about their job? Jennifer.
So I think comments like this can have a chilling effect on journalists, but I think more so, my concern is with our audience and the people that we're trying to reach. If the president is making these comments, that is endangering the trust that we're working so hard as media organizations to build, and undermining the work that we're doing every day. So yes, I do believe that it impacts our industry, but more so, I feel for the audience that is trying to parse what's true, what's not, and who to believe in this media ecosystem that we're in now.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I think it's already had a significant impact.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen what's happened at CBS News. We've seen, the Washington Post, killing their endorsement of Kamala Harris. There are many examples of media owners kind of capitulating to this kind of rhetoric and pressure. So, I mean, that's not to say there are a lot of people standing strong, but I think that the intimidation has had an impact. And the fact that Brendan Carr is making these threats, about broadcast licenses, when what the media is doing is actually just portraying what is actually happening in the Middle East, that is a truly, chilling fact.
Exactly.
I'll add one small point that I just think it goes back to your questions earlier about ownership and also about our strategies and how we're going to continue to, be thriving businesses as long as we can feel safe and protected in terms of the business. We're going to stand up for the rights of a free press. You saw the Times take action in suing the Defense Department. That's something we hadn't done previously, hadn't had to do, but feel like is a really important stance to take in this moment. But I agree that we've already seen chilling effects, and it's concerning.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's turn to questions. Our first one is, we talk a lot about AI creating fake content, but the bigger problem might be the liar's dividend when real footage gets dismissed as AI. How do we prepare? Is that something that you're grappling with?
We do a lot of fact checks at Newsweek. We'll say, this thing happened, is it true or not? And give, shed light on the issue. So that's one aspect of how we're really trying to cut through the AI noise online and elsewhere.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think one thing we say a lot or think about a lot is whenever there's a really hard question, usually, or an issue, usually applying more journalism to it to figure it out helps get to the answer. So, I think about our visual investigations desk at the Times, which is a part of our video team that does basically forensic work to piece together satellite images and cameras that are placed in various places where incidents are happening to kind of put together the story of what actually happened. And so I think my reaction to that is that more journalism to help really uncover what's actually going on will help clarify whether something is real or not real.
Yeah. It is definitely a challenge I think everybody is facing. Your outlets have stayed away from mass layoffs that have hit other publications. Can you talk about what these layoffs mean for the news industry as a whole?
We just talked about it a little bit. The thing that worries me that I think we haven't solved yet, it's not solved, is what does it mean for our future journalists? Students who see the industry shrinking, they see the attacks that our colleagues are enduring, and I am questioning, the reasons for going into the business, and I think that's a real problem. And then also the decimation, unfortunately, of a lot of local news outlets where that's where people have historically been trained to become journalists. If they're not there, places like the Times and Newsweek and the Guardian don't have people to take from them and to turn into even global and national journalists. So to me, that's the biggest concern is the.
And I will note the Times scooped up 6 sports reporters from the Washington Post the second they were laid off.
It helps that our editor was a former Washington Post editor as well.
The Atlantic has been on a huge hiring spree, bringing in a lot of reporters who were either at the Washington Post or other places that had laid them off. But that, at the end of the day, is kind of a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, and one really significant thing about the Post was that they let go all of their foreign reporters. And if you look at the last decade, many news organizations have vastly reduced their capacity to cover foreign news, which, if you look at what's going on in the world, makes very little sense.
That's right. Lay off all of your foreign correspondents and then have a war in the Middle East break out. It is.
And I do think because news organizations have made the decision to move away, for the most part, not the Times, and not the Guardian, but from foreign news, because it is difficult and expensive. Sometimes American audiences are, less interested in reading about countries other than ours.
True.
But because of that, it's harder for foreign correspondents to find work again, and then that has a really serious consequence for all of us as citizens, because we're going to lack adequate information about what's going on in the rest of the world, which often relates directly to politics here, because the U.S. still plays such an enormous role globally.
Right. Let me take another one.
I just wanted to jump in very quickly with a very startling stat from Reuters. In 2025, 17,000 roles were eliminated in the journalism industry, and that made it among the most distressed white-collar industries of any in the United States. So our industry is under severe stress, under severe pressure, but as we're eroding roles in national outlets, as there's a decline in regional and local news, guess what? The real loser in all of this is the reader and the audience. They're the ones that are losing out on knowing what's happening in their communities and in their states and in their countries. So the lack of journalists and the decline in journalism is an emergency that we all need to be paying attention to.
That's a very good point. Another question. We are losing more and more local news outlets every year. Can regional papers and local media apply similar business models to survive?
I came up in local news. I was the municipal reporter for Totowa, West Paterson, and Little Falls in northern New Jersey. So local news is very close to my heart. And I think that if I was the executive editor, the editor-in-chief of the Bergen Record where I came up, I would be really encouraging the reporters and editors to lean into data-driven AI insights, because that's something that is very cheap or free, that can really leverage a newsroom's resources and really put them on an equal footing with more substantially resourced news organizations.
Yeah, I'll say two quick things. One is that I still believe that if you make great products, that you can ultimately find an audience for them. Obviously, local is hard. There's no question, and we've seen publications struggle across the country. But making a great product generally can lead to a great audience and lead to a good business. And then in a funny way, I sort of think that AI bots, AI chat models really need local journalism, local information in different ways. There's a lot of people covering national news and global news. There are very few people who are covering what's going on in Paterson, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And if they are seeking to be the answer engine for everyone everywhere, they are going to need information that they can't get without that kind of reporting. So maybe there's some optimism in that.
Hope so. Let's see. How do you decide how to use different channels, own sites versus external platforms, and is the ultimate goal still to bring audiences back to your own platforms?
I can start there.
Okay.
Yes, we believe that to build a sustainable business, we have to have people engaging with the times at scale. And so it is always going to be our mission to do that. And we believe we have to meet people where they are. Traffic patterns are changing dramatically. The biggest tech platforms are changing the way people consume, discover information. They are doing everything to keep people in their own environments, really changing the geometry for how they work with publishers. And yet we need to be there to make sure that we're in front of people, although ultimately with the end goal of bringing them back to the Times to build direct relationships with them.
Great.
Betsy hit it on the head. We want to meet the audience where they are, wherever they are, whether it's MSN.com or TikTok, but the ultimate goal is to bring them to Newsweek.com or have them go out and buy a magazine. Mm-hmm. That's where we are.
Okay.
We're also looking at, not just thinking about our own platform as the website, but, the podcasts, and newsletters and other kinds of means of creating that direct relationship. It's crucial.
How can university journalism programs better align their curriculum to emphasize fact-checking and community-rooted reporting over the outrage creator trend? Any thoughts on the journalism programs in America?
I mean, as far as I understand it, the university journalism programs I'm aware of do a pretty good job training people in sort of traditional modes of reporting. But the fact remains that it's difficult for people coming out of those institutions to get full-time jobs, so that they are sometimes tracked into the outrage creator world. And the problem with that world is that, not to denigrate it, because I think a lot of interesting work is being done there, and a lot of it is journalistic in many ways, but the creators, in order to make a living, need to make deals with brands, and it becomes very difficult to maintain individually your independence when you are depending on the largesse of a particular brand, until you then are inclined to promote it. So it is hard for in that ecosystem to produce the kind of journalism that we need to see.
Totally. Let's make this the last question. If the public stops believing journalists when they present evidence, what mechanisms still exist to hold power accountable? I think this is a very existential
Very
question.
profound, yeah.
Yeah, for all of us. Rebecca, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's the fear a lot of us share. I'll say the Times is doing a lot to explain our journalism and how it comes together and what it means to be an independent news organization differently and more actively than we ever have. I mentioned this before, but we've always thought of ourselves as wanting to stay out of the story, the kind of corporate New York Times, but have found that we need to do a much better job of helping people, and this is about media literacy too, it kind of gets to the previous question about journalism programs. We really, I think, need to help people understand what it means to be an independent news organization and why it's so critical to the sustainability of a democracy. And so our efforts are a way of helping the public know what it means to have a process to get to an independent story ultimately, that it goes through any number of editors and people to make sure that bias is really looked at and make sure that it's sort of scrubbed in a thoughtful way, that we look at mistakes that we've made and make sure that we fix them or reflect them in corrections. There are any number, we call independence a process. It's not that you come with no points of view as a journalist, it's that you put your story into a process to make sure that it's as sort of scrubbed as possible. And we are now doing more to explain that to people, which we're hopeful will to combat a lot of the undermining language that's out there otherwise.
I think a world without journalism is a very, very scary one, and something that I'm working every day, and I'm sure my panelists here on the dais are working towards every day. I think in order for us to not get to a place where journalism is just not believed, we have to continue to have a conversation and engage with our audience, once again, wherever they are. And as Rebecca was saying, owning up to our mistakes, being transparent about our ethical use of AI, and really not approaching journalism as this sort of holier than thou industry where we're talking down to people. We need to be having a two-way conversation with our audience in order to regain and reestablish that trust.
Yeah, I just would second that. And I think, both being very transparent about the evidence that we're using, the reporting method, and then correcting mistakes and acknowledging them prominently when they occur. At The Guardian, we have a reader's editor office that people can appeal to, and it's independent of the newsroom, and she will investigate the complaint and publish an answer, and she helps with the language of a correction when it's necessary. And I think it's incredibly valuable because that trust is that's everything.
Mm-hmm. That is super important, and not every news organization has a reader representative or an ombudsman these days. So I think that's a big deal. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience and to our panelists. This was a great conversation.